Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to another Destiny video. As you may well know, every Thursday Bungie drop their weekly update where they detail any recent changes that have come to Destiny, or any upcoming events, noteworthy information, you name it. Pretty much anything you need to know about the Destiny universe is contained in these posts, and today's video is about exactly that. This week's weekly update has gone live, and I'm going to give you a rundown of everything you need to know. Now, the main topic of this week's post is the upcoming February update, 1.1.1. which contains the long-awaited fix for the heavy ammo glitch, the one where you lose ammo when you respawn. Oh yes. But it also contains a bit more than just a fix for that issue. However, before Bungie began talking about the update, they wanted to briefly comment about the most recent House of Wolves leaks that dropped the other day. Now if you missed any of those, make sure you head over to the channel after this video, because I've got a complete breakdown on everything you need to know. The new level cap, the rumour release date, new armour, etc. It's all there for you guys to check out. Now, while Bungie said that right now it's too early for them to talk about House of Wolves, and they wouldn't be commenting on speculation, what they did say is that it's slated for Q2 2015, which basically means sometime between April, May and June. But in the leaked information the other day, the supposed launch date was said to be May 19th, and while at the time that did seem a little far away, given that they've now said it will launch in Q2, that does now seem rather plausible. Anyway, with all that said and done, that's the only thing we're getting about House of Wolves this week, so let's now talk about the topic at hand. As I mentioned, the February update, which will drop at some point before the end of the month, will fix the annoying heavy ammo glitch, but it also aims to help out that poor unused primary weapon. Yes, I'm talking about the pulse rifle. Bungie put out a tweet the other day, probably as a joke, asking people what their favourite pulse rifle was, and the majority of responses were pretty much along the lines of, are you serious? There's no such thing as good pulse rifles, do they even exist? You know, all that kind of stuff. Basically, it was a joke. In fact, pulse rifles are so underused. Look at these stats. In PvE, auto rifles take the top spot at 18%, scout rifles are close second at 16%, hand cannons third at 7%, that's me, and pulse rifles as low as 6%. Then, if you look at the Crucible, auto rifles again top at 19%, hand cannons second this time at 7%, scout rifles pretty low at 3%, but pulse rifles right down there at 2%. So, as you can see, pretty unloved. So, in this month's update, there will also be some weapon tweaks. And with that in mind, alongside this week's weekly update, Bungie also dropped a mammoth post on weapon tuning. There's a hell of a lot to read, and a lot of numbers and graphs, so if you want to see all of it in full, I'll leave a link to both posts in the description box down below, but in the meantime, here's an overview. Each of these are broken down into Bungie's goals for what they want the weapon to do, and then followed by the changes that they're actually going to implement in the February update. First up, auto rifles. The goal is that these are effectively close-up chainsaws. They are most effective at close to medium range, and the damage, stability and range should be tuned as such so that players rely on them in the right engagements and don't try and use them to snipe. So, to help this, the changes are as follows. The base damage on auto rifles has been reduced by 2.5%, and the effective range has been reduced so the damage fall off and accuracy factor more strongly into your combat decisions. In other words, don't use an auto rifle at range. Then alongside that, range stats on auto rifles will become more effective. So, if you're fortunate enough to have an auto rifle with a decent range stat, it'll actually make a difference. Next up, pulse rifles. The goal for these weapons is that they are most effective at mid-range, but are still able to harass enemies at both close and long ranges. But also, the rate of fire needs to set a pace that both allows players to track their opponents, and also dish out high damage in bursts. So, all of this is supposedly going to be combated with one change. They will be increasing the base damage of pulse rifles by a whopping 9.7%, so that the DPS is more in line with the other primaries. Then moving on to hand cannons, my personal favourites. These are designed again to be optimal at mid-range, and they also become more effective when you pace your shots. In other words, don't spam the trigger like there's no tomorrow. The changes coming are that the effective range of hand cannons is now going to be reduced, and the damage fall-off starts closer to the shooter, and then follow-up shots become less accurate at long distances. There's also a slight reduction to the initial accuracy, but apparently it's unnoticeable at close to medium range, but it's just there to reduce what I like to call hand cannon sniping. Then, skipping over scout rifles, as apparently they're fine as they are, we then move on to fusion rifles. The goal for this weapon is that they are optimal at mid-range, where targets are easier to track but not necessarily close enough to attack while you charge, and therefore the fusion rifle should require combat foresight and the ability to predict where your target is going to let off a shot. As such, the changes are as follows. The blast pattern on a fusion rifle burst cone is now wider. Again, close to medium range attacks won't actually notice this, but at a distance, the projectiles are less likely to hit. So those fusion rifle snipers, as I like to call them, should be a thing of the past. Additionally, the initial starting ammo is reduced across all ammo stats. This is mainly designed to affect the Crucible, so it basically means you'll begin the round with fewer fusion rifle bullets. In PvE, it won't really be that noticeable. Then lastly, the shotguns. So, the goal for this weapon is to make it optimal at very close range. It's designed to complement melee attacks and other close quarter builds, and opting to close in on an enemy with a shotty is a risk-reward strategy. So the changes for this are kind of split into two. Firstly, when in PvE, if you're fighting like aliens as they like to call them, you'll get a whopping 2 times damage increase. That is massive, so that should make this a hell of a lot more viable when you're kind of using things like, for example in the Abyss, shotguns up until now I've never really used them, but they might actually become a lot more viable this time around. But then if you switch over to the Crucible, the high-end damage range values are reduced, so the damage fall-off begins sooner. So players with long-range shotguns need to be a bit closer, so hopefully you won't get one of those scenarios where you're running down a corridor and someone kind of shoots you from the other side of the corridor with a shotgun. And, just like the fusion rifles, the starting ammo in the Crucible will be less for shotguns. Aside from that, the other weapons largely remained untouched. Scout rifles, snipers, the heavies, apparently they're all fine. So, with all that said and done, that brings me to the end of this video. As I mentioned before, the update will go live before the end of February. Once we know an exact date, I'll let you guys know, but for now, that's it. If you want to read any of these articles yourself, I'll leave links to both of them in the description box down below so you can enjoy them in full. But otherwise, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not already part of the Arekkz Gaming Nation, then hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our daily gaming videos. Thank you very much for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.